Hello, hello, and welcome back to the channel with a very special stream. This is going to act as the last video in the Fallout 1 playlist. So the game ended very anticlimactically for us. And there's a few reasons why I'm choosing to just let it end the way it did. One, that's not the first bug we saw. That game has been very buggy and messy all through. I'm worried that maybe the mod I used to restore cut content messed some things up, or maybe just because the game's too old and it's a little jank, and and even if I kept the cut content out, there would have been problems with the game, because the game released with problems that never got fixed. And I felt I had stopped enjoying the game, so I really felt like at that point I was like, I'm just gonna end this here. I have representation of the original Fallout on my channel now, and I'm happy with that. Even though I didn't beat the title, I got far enough in it where I'm satisfied with what I did. Maybe in the future we'll return, but maybe not. Hello, Tyrant King. But for now, we're gonna do something very special to sort of commemorate the end of it and to start laying the groundwork for future Fallout series on the channel. And that is a PowerPoint presentation. A very special PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to try and go over some things, and I'm going to start this presentation with the first section, the Vault Dweller's Memoirs. The Vault Dweller's Memoirs are the introduction to Fallout 2's manual, and what these do is they go over what canonically occurs in Fallout 2. And so we're going to go ahead and read through that. Hang on. So I'm gonna just get a few more things in position for the stream. Okay. So we're gonna read the Vault Dweller's Memoirs through and sort of discuss what this means for the lore, and then there'll be more sections after that. So this is just the first part. So let's get started on the memoirs. The one thing, hang on. The one good thing about growing old is that you get your way. The new leaders of the tribe, they refuse to call themselves elders until I have passed on, which should be soon, if I'm lucky. Hold on, sorry. Which should be soon if I'm lucky. Fuck, I got it. Sorry, subtle technical, there we go. Which should be soon if I'm lucky. Want me to record my knowledge for future generations. Bah. What knowledge they need is to be found with sweat and blood, not some letters on a page. But the future is a great unknown, and they may have a point. To make them happy, I've written down what I feel will be important. The important word being what I feel will be important. They want me to write my memoirs. Fine, I'll do it. But as the song goes, I'll do it my way, and I'm old enough that I will get my way. The war. I know little about the war, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of people died when a lot of atomic bombs went off and nearly destroyed the world. If you don't know what an atomic bomb is, then imagine the worst thing possible. Atomic bombs were worse than that. The vaults. Like all the original members of the tribe, I came from, hang on. Maybe I should. Oh, don't worry, there'll be whole things in regards to when I play through Fallout 2 and such. But, what was I saying? Like all the original members of the tribe, I came from the vaults, before the war. The government of the United States, which numbered into thousands of villages, and had many, and had many tribesmen per village, paid to have these huge holes dug in mountains and huts of metal and stone built underground. There were many vaults. Some were close to cities, and some far away. These vaults were to be used as safe places in the case of atomic war. As you may guess, when the war came, your ancestors made it to a vault. Vault 13, to be specific. For several generations, your ancestors and mine lived within the vault. As best as they could figure, it was too dangerous to try and leave the vault. They grew their own food, recycled their waste, read, worked, slept, had families, and even purified the necessary water within the vault. I was born in the Creche, and was raised by the community and a robot. It was a good life, but all good things come to an end. About 3 generations after the war, the water purification chip and the vault relied on to create fresh water broke down. All the spare parts were missing or busted, and without the water chip, the vault was doomed. Something had to be done. The overseer gathered the healthy of us between a certain age and made us draw straws. Guess what? I drew the short one. Wouldn't be much of a story if I didn't, would it? I left the vault the next day. Yes, there's a lot of things in not only does the manual here imply that, but in Fallout 2 you will find statues built in honor of the character that depict him as male. Now, there is actually an arguable dubiousness to this fact. I'm going to take a quick tangent with that question. Todd Howard, I'm going to be very much paraphrasing a quote from him that I very much like. This was him talking about Skyrim and Elder Scrolls Online when he was being questioned about the canonicity of things. And he established what Bethesda views as the hierarchy of canon. The highest degree of canon is what you as a player see with your own 2 eyes. If you see something happen, it happens. The second layer is second-hand accounts, books and verbal words from other characters telling you things you didn't see. And third is out-of-game supplementary material, handbooks, strategy guides, novelizations. That's the third layer. The third layer. Now, this whole manual lays in the third layer, and the statues you see in Fallout 2 lie in the second layer. So, the canon we have implies that the character was male. But, in your canon, they can be a woman if that is how you prefer it, which is a very interesting way of handling it. Of course, that's Bethesda. Bethesda bought the franchise later on, and that was him talking about Skyrim, not Fallout, so take all of that with a grain of salt. But anyway, life on the outside. My first few days were harrowing, to say the least. I fought off some giant mutant rats that were more interested in eating me than they should have been. My only clue was the location of another vault, number 15. I spent a couple of days stumbling through the desert before I came to a small settlement. I stopped there for help and encountered the little town called Shady Sands. I helped them, and they helped me. Understand that survival requires that you work together, even with people you may not trust. I did earn the trust, however, of 2 prominent citizens in Shady Sands. Tandy and her father, Ardash. With their knowledge and the help of a man called Ian, this artwork comes from the Fallout board game, and it is the highest quality image of Ian that exists. A man called Ian, I continued on my way to Vault 15. The ruins of Vault 15, to be more specific, ravaged by the elements, scavengers, and time itself. Vault 15 was no help for my people. The control room that contained their water chip was buried under tons of fallen rock, and I had to move on. After a small problem with some raiders, who would continue for years to plague not only myself but the tribe, I found myself in Junktown. It was there that I learned the most important rule of all. Doing good things sometimes means being a very bad person. My memories of Junktown are tainted, and I feel no remorse for the actions in that place. It was there that I came across a dog, who adopted me and was my faithful friend from there on. I miss dog meat to this day. While Junktown was a city of traders and traitors, it did not have a water chip. I was not desperate yet, and there was still time for me to recover the chip and return to my home. But I needed to move on. Fortunately, they pointed me in the direction of the hub, the largest city in the wasteland. The hub was a larger city than both Junktown and Shady Sands combined. But you could drop a vault in there, and you would probably not notice. But the people of Hub had no life. It was a desolate place, just the same. It eased my mind. However, to hire some merchants to bring water to the vault. Looking back, it was probably a mistake to do so. But I was still innocent of the evils that lurked throughout the ruins of civilization. I can't vault roll was female, chosen one was male, lone wanderer was male, courier was male. 76 driller, not sure about that. Alright, that's interesting. A small clue led me to a city of ghouls. The place they call Necropolis. It was there that I encountered large mutants, armed with weapons of unknown origin. It was with heavy sadness that I say lost Ian. I say that Ian lost his life in the city of the dead. A super mutant burned him to death with a flamethrower. The passage of time is no proof against the memory of burning flesh. His sacrifice was not in vain, as I did find the water chip buried beneath the city. It was with easier steps that I returned to Vault 13. While the Overseer was obviously happy to see me returning to the vault, alive and with the necessary water chip, he was distraught at my description of super mutants. It is here that I realized my mistake I had made with the water merchants. I had pointed them and others in the direction of our home. Without the protection of anonymity, the vault could easily have been destroyed. The knowledge of the fate of Vault 15 did not help. The Overseer tasked me with a new mission: find and destroy the danger of the super mutants. Once again, I left the vault. This time, it was easier on my heart. Looking back now, I realize it was only the first time I should have seen the true hearts of the other vault dwellers and the Overseer. I returned to the hub, looking for clues. Some time was spent there. I discovered a shady underworld amongst the hustle and bustle of the large city. They thought they could manipulate me, but I proved them wrong and used the crooks instead. I did rescue a young man who belonged to the Brotherhood of Steel. A few troublemakers tried to stop me, but I learned much of survival since leaving the vault. It was in my best interest to leave town for a while. I journeyed to the Brotherhood, thinking they would have the knowledge I sought. I tried to join them. They required me to go on excuse me, go on a quest before they would let me in. Thinking it would be a short and easy quest, I agreed to set off for a place called the Glow. The horror of atomic war had never been so obvious until then. The Brotherhood was surprised to see me, even more surprised to see that I had not only survived their quest, but succeeded. They gave me the information I required and some of their technology. I set off in search of the Boneyard. On my way, I took a detour to stop by Necropolis in order to see some old friends. Unfortunately, that place was now truly the lost city of dead. All the ghouls had been slaughtered. Large mutants roamed the streets. I found only one survivor who told me that mutants had attacked shortly after I had left. Before he died, the ghoul told me that the mutants were looking for a pure strain of humans, and one in particular. The ghoul's description of the mutant's special target fit me perfectly. It was with heavy heart and a cold burning in my soul that I continued to the Boneyard. The Master. The city of Los Angeles must have been the largest city in the world before the war. The LA Boneyard stretched on forever, the skeletons of buildings laying under the hot sun. Not even the wind entered this dead city. I found many enemies and a few friends in the Boneyard. I killed when necessary and learned more about the nature of my true foes. Deep underground, I found an evil that was behind the mutants and their army. Within a dark, foreboding vault, there were walls dripping with human flesh, and the screams of dying echoes through the halls. I found many evil creatures and mutants. Walking amongst the misshapen ones, I killed one of their servants and took his clothing. Hidden from the casual search, I made my way to the bottom of the vault. The deeper into the vault I went, the more gruesome the journey. More and more flesh was to be found, integrating into the very walls. The worst part of it was the flesh that was still alive and even aware of my presence. After a while, I found myself in the presence of the most hideous sight yet. I still cannot bring myself to write of this discovery, but let it be known that when I left, the beast was dead, and the master of the mutants was no more. The vats. My job was still not finished, for I still had one task remaining. The master had literally built his army on mutants at the time. Humans, preferably with little radiation damage, were captured and sent to the vats. There, they were dipped into something called FEV, which transformed them into large, grotesque mutants. I had to find these vats and put them out of action as well. At least another take the master's place and continue to build the mutant army. Fortunately, my friends at the Brotherhood of Steel had a few clues to help me reach my goal. Invading the vats, I came across more mutants and robots. None of them could stand in my way. I had a mission. I had a goal. I had a really large gun. It was here that Dogmeat fell, a victim of the powerful energy force field. I missed that dog. I destroyed the vats that day, and with it, the mutant army. The last I heard, they splintered and disappeared into the desert. My return to Vault 13. I was not treated to a hero's welcome when I returned to Vault 13. The Overseer met me outside the massive vault door, and told me, point blank, that while my service to the vault will always be remembered, he could no longer trust me or what I had become. He said something along the lines that I had saved the vault, and now I must leave. Bastard. And so I left. The days and weeks that followed were hard on me. I had met few true friends outside the vault, and they had died following me. Now, my family had kicked me out and said that I could never return. I screamed. I cried. Slowly, I came to realize that the Overseer may have been correct. I had changed. Life outside the vault was different, and now I, too, was different. But I had never forgiven him for doing what he did to me. I wandered the desert, but never moved far from the mountains that shielded the vaults from the rest of the world. Perhaps I wanted to return it and force my way in, or plead for them to take me back. Fortunately, it did not come to that. I found a few wretched souls, a small group of vault dwellers who, upon hearing of what had happened to me, had decided to leave the vault and join my side. They knew little of the outside world, and would have died if it were not for my assistance. Together, our little group moved up north, away from the vault, and away from that old life. Slowly, I taught them what expertise had taught me, and together we learned to thrive. The tribe. Over time, our ragtag group turned into a tribe. I fell in love with one of them, and we raised a family, like all our tribe's people. We founded the village, beyond the Great Cliffs. It was a secure home, thanks to our hard work. We would send scouts back towards the vault to help others who thought like ourselves, but that slowly came to an end. We no longer headed in that direction. I often wondered what became of Vault 13 and the other vaults, but I never had time to go exploring again. I taught the others the skills they would need to survive and grow strong. Hunting, farming, other skills to feed us, engineering and science to build our homes, fighting to protect what was ours. My love and I had led a life in the village. My love and I led the village and the tribe. The tribe grew and grew stronger with our help, grew stronger with our help. But all things come to an end. Our sons and daughters are now the leaders. I'm sure that the tribe will continue to grow under the leadership of our citizens. My love perished years ago, and not a day goes by that I do not think of Pat's face. I see it every time I look at our children. This journal is our legacy to them, to their children, and to the rest of the tribe. That is my story, and I'm sticking to it. The Wanderer. And that is the canon story of the Fallout 1 protagonist. Now, it's interesting because they make note of some side quests, but not all of them. And so you're left to question exactly how many things they canonically did. And many of their decisions are left somewhat up to interpretation. How did they kill the master? In what ways did they deal with the criminal underbelly of Junktown? You know, things like that. There's even a couple companions that are never mentioned in their memoirs, implying that they may have never even traveled with them. But before we go too deep into that, it's time to talk about the things we missed. There's a lot of things that I missed in my playthrough. Lots of things all over the place that just went right past me. One of which was one of the companions. Tycho. Tycho was a companion that we were supposed to be able to recruit in Junktown, but I could never get him to appear or find him to talk with him, and I'm not entirely sure what went wrong. I believe getting him to join me would have been part of the Skulls quest line, so that could be why it didn't work out. But Tycho is a rather interesting character in the grand scheme of Fallout. You see, when they just... what we know about Tycho from talking with him is that he's part of a group of rangers from back east. And in his description, where is it? He's specifically described as... where is it? God, I can't find his description here. But Tycho, he's described as wearing like a leather coat, like certain pieces of armor. And his description was specifically meant to be a reference to a previous game from Fallout's creator, Wasteland. And this is where we can talk about some fun history of the Fallout series. See, the creator of Fallout initially made a game called Wasteland. Wasteland is basically the spiritual predecessor to Fallout. It holds a lot of mechanical and thematic similarities. But the company that he made it with squatted on the ownership, so he was never able to make a Wasteland 2. So he jumped ship and made Fallout with Interplay instead. And Tycho's description was designed to be a reference to the Rangers of Wasteland, the protagonists you play as in that game. And when he says he comes from East, that's referencing the Nevada Rangers of Wasteland. But later on, when they would make Fallout New Vegas, they would decide to revisit this concept and create Fallout's version of the Nevada Rangers, which we would see all over the place in Fallout New Vegas, creating a fun little inspirational loop of sorts. But moving on, another thing I missed was a number of quests that could be found in the hub. We missed a lot of the side quests in the hub because I was getting worried about the timeline, or the time limit. Rightfully so, because we missed an entire part of the game because of the time limit. And one of them was Iguana Bob, which some of you might remember I got a little worked up fearing that a quest had been spoiled, but we never even got around to doing that quest because, like many other things, it bugged out on me. The quest is rather simple. Iguana Bob within Junktown was selling iguana bits and strange meat. Now, if you inquire where he gets the strange meat, you would play coy about it. But if you visit the doctor in Junktown and explore their basement, you discover that he has been chopping up humans and selling human meat to Iguana Bob, who's been knowingly selling it, saying it's other meat. You could then go and report Iguana Bob and get him arrested by the Junktown police. Then another quest, hold on, is, give me a moment. Another one of the quests that we missed in our playthrough, if I can get the thing to come up. Here we go. Is this fellow and his quest line, one of the few talking heads in the game. Hang on. Sorry, I'm clicking through the wiki. By the way, massive props to the Fallout wiki for giving me a lot of the information that I'm feeding to all of you right now. Wasteland is not the inspiration for Old World Blues Desert Rangers. Old World Blues Desert Rangers are just the Desert Rangers that exist in Fallout. But in a very stretched way, they kind of are. Because Fallout's Rangers are inspired by the Wasteland Rangers, and Old World Blues Rangers are inspired by Fallout's Rangers. Try and wrap your head around that one. But, this guy is tied to a whole quest line in the hub, about being part of a thieves guild. His name is Loxley, and he's specifically a reference to Robin Hood, and he would have had a whole quest line relating around stealing from various people in, the hub. Additionally, there was Decker. No talking head for him. He was the head of the criminal underbelly, and there's a whole quest line related to shutting down the criminal organization in the hub that we missed. But now, let's move on to the Boneyard, LA. There is a lot we missed there, because we got there too late. See, Fallout has a sort of deadline mechanic where if you take too long, places start getting invaded by the mutants, which I'll take this moment to talk about my feelings on that. I used to love this conceptually, thinking that adding timelines like this made the world feel more alive. But there's a large problem to it, and that it takes away player agency. The average player playing the game casually never gets to do the LA questline because it always gets killed before they can get there when they're following the natural flow of the story. Oh, maybe they did use pictures, or they did use references to Wasteland and Old World Blues. I never realized that. That's really interesting. I guess they probably pulled a little bit from it, considering it's like there's a lot of overlap in the themes of the two factions. That's fun. But yeah, By the way, for those who don't understand what I mean when I'm saying Old World Blues, we don't mean the Fallout New Vegas DLC Old World Blues, we mean the Hearts of Iron strategy game mod Old World Blues that turns it into a Fallout strategy game. But, yeah, I've started to dislike the time limit, and I think it could have been handled better. Instead of the super mutants immediately killing the towns, I think instead the deadline should have triggered an invasion event, which makes it so that when you go there, there's a whole new quest about trying to help defend the town from attacking mutants. I think that could have led to a funner, more dynamic way of introducing the deadlines. But anyway, moving on. The Boneyard was a absolutely massive section of the game. I'd argue that a good half of the game is found just here, and we missed it because of that shitty little deadline. The first part being Aditum. Aditum was supposed to be a small, enclosed community that was going through, a lot of, like, little internal strifes and disputes. So, the actual thing going on with it is, they could be able to do things like help with their farms, but also help them with gang problems, where they are being attacked by a group of gangs called the Razors, amongst many other things. There's also a guy here that would be able to upgrade your power armor. I believe he's the only person in the game who can. The next section was Boneyard. This is where one of the gangs known as the Blades lived. The Blades being, just sort of like one of the many violent gangs. I'm gonna sort of cliff note this, rather than going super in detail. The next section would have been the Fortress, which served as the home of the Gunrunners, a faction that New Vegas fans may be familiar with, a group of people who create, are able to create firearms post-war. Then there's the Boneyard Library, where a group known as the Followers of the Apocalypse would have lived. They're a humanitarian organization that is dedicated to spreading education and healthcare throughout the wasteland. A very interesting questline would have been here, where you would have had to help them uncover a spy within their organization seeking to bring it down. A spy from the Church of the Holy Unity. Now, sadly, in the base game, this quest is actually impossible to complete because they deleted an NPC before final release by mistake. Then the last location would have been the Deathclaw Warehouse, former base of a gang that would have been called the Rippers. It's just a place full of fucking Deathclaws. Moving on, there is one more piece of content that I'm sad we weren't able to see. And we're going to take a look at that content right now. And that content is the Master, the main antagonist of Fallout.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die! Oh, please, what sort of plan might that be? You might be telling the
Truth.
It doesn't matter, but I will let you go for now.
I just wanted to show a little bit of that character off, because their animation and their speech pattern is so interesting and grotesque. Full credit to the YouTuber Dark Power right here. I'm using their video. Go watch the video, give it a like. I'll be linking it down below in the YouTube version of this. But, anyway, that video shows a lot of the dialogue interactions you would have been able to have with them. The Master is a fascinating character. Some of you might remember the friendly mutant we met, Harold, who told his story about his time in the Mariposa military base with a friend of his. That friend of his is the man who becomes the Master. His name was, what was it? Let me just bring the presentation back up real fast. And I'm just gonna quickly... Sorry for the blinking. There you go. Drawing of the Master. So the Master is a very fascinating character. I just want to go over their story a little bit. See, when you find them, the house is described, they're in a vault that is overgrown with flesh. And that is them. That is them being a massive, gross, fleshy, living monster amalgamation. Their name was Richard Morris, and they are one of the first generations of wasteland survivors. Having come straight from a vault and spent much of their life, growing up around the hub and being a traveling trader. Eventually, they would have gone to the Mariposa military base with Harold in an attempt to... They're kind of part machine, I'll get to that. They went with Harold, along with their other friends, to try and stop the mutant armies of the Mariposa military base, which they would succeed in doing, but in the process, Harold got knocked into a vat of FEV, and his body completely dissolved. But he would eventually manage to somehow muscle his way out as a slug slime monster of a creature. In horrible pain, he would emerge, and parts of his body acting outside of his control would begin reaching out and eating rodents. This would add to his gray matter and his bodily mass, making him more intelligent and stronger, and slowly giving him control over his body. He would spend years in this state, in pain as a disgusting monster. Eventually, he'd begin to develop psychic powers, and try to use those to command the rodents, allowing them to serve as his new legs. They would carry him around, and he would sort of drag himself with his own muscly, grotesque appendages, and eventually he'd manage to start creating mutant monsters, the centaurs and the flatworms enemies that we see, and he would send them out to capture humans and start creating the first super mutants who we'd have psychic control over. His goal was to unify humanity. If he removed all differences between humans, got rid of all culture, race, gender, individuality, there would be peace. His plan was to make us all one, to make us all super mutants, led by him. Ultimately, there's a lot of ways you can deal with him. You can detonate a nuclear bomb that he keeps underneath. Oh, one more thing. Eventually, he would move himself out of the Mariposa military base to looking for a new lair, and the one he would find is a prototype vault in LA underneath the Vault Tech headquarters, which he would turn into his cathedral. It's a vault that was built to show it off to the public and get people to want to buy it, and he would have his people bring him there and put him in the overseer's control panel, making him sort of a foil to your own overseer. There he would be fed more FEV and genetic material, and he would grow into the technology, becoming a sort of pseudo-cyborg in the process, and giving him control over the building's electronics. But like I said, there would have been a number of ways that you could kill him. Blowing up the nuke under his base, leading the Brotherhood on an attack, killing him with your own hands. But I've always found the most poetic and interesting is the most difficult. If you don't consider the janky fighting the most difficult. See, we found documented evidence in the West Tech research facility that all mutants are human mutants are sterilized. If we bring this evidence to him, explain it to him with a high enough science skill, and convince him with a high enough speech skill, we can make him understand that his super mutant army would have died after just one generation. And he would seem sad for a moment and speak in the most collected voice he had ever used in your dialogue with him, not broken between several voices, but his true voice, the voice of Richard Morey, would ask you to step out so he could think for a moment. And as you left the room, you would hear the alert go off that the nuclear bomb underneath the facility had been armed, and he would kill himself and his entire mutant army so as to not end the world. A very interesting character in Fallout lore. But moving on, there's one more thing I want to talk about. The cut content of Fallout. Because I find all of this very interesting. Most of the cut content came down to time constraints. A little bit of it came down to tone. And that's how we're going to break it down. We're first going to talk about the things they cut due to time constraints, then the things that they chose to cut because they didn't think it fit the tone. The first thing they cut was 2 more Raider factions. One of them was the Jekylls. Very little is known of what their plans were for the Jekylls, but they would later reappear in Fallout New Vegas. We do know that the Jekylls would have been another threat to settlements, and perhaps there would have been a quest line related to dealing with them. Who knows? The next one was the Vipers. This right here is the only image we have of the Vipers camp. It was noted that it was supposed to contain a second section. That second section would have had a pit full of Vipers, which would have been a separate, unique enemy. Ultimately, this is why the Raider group got cut. They didn't have time to create the Vipers, and so they cut the faction entirely, because the Vipers are integral to their story. The Viper gang would have been a very interesting one. They were started by people who were bit by radioactive snakes and hallucinated, and became convinced that there was a giant snake god guiding them. The way they would get new members is they would kidnap people and throw them into the pit of the Pit Vipers. If you died to them, you weren't worthy of joining, but if you survived, you'd get vivid hallucinations of their snake god, and almost everybody who went into the pit would willingly join. We as players would have had the option to join them, much like how we have the ability to join the cons. The next cut faction I'd like to talk about is the Thinker Nightkin. This would have been a group of friendly super mutants that left the Master. Beyond that, not a lot is known of them, but I'd like to believe they would have been an alternative path to attacking and killing the Master, separate from joining the Brotherhood of Steel. At least, I think that would have been the most interesting way. I do love the idea of a group of friendly super mutants, and it's very clear that the creators of the series do, because Interplay and later Obsidian Entertainment would create many friendly super mutant factions. Now, these next 2 areas that we're going to talk about were cut due to tone. The first was Irvine, and would have been located at this crater here. Irvine is actually where Interplay's headquarters were, and a lot of Irvine was meant to be a jab at their overbearing landlord. They had a landlord that demanded absolute visual perfection of the exterior of the building, with well-trimmed lawns and bushes. So they had the idea of something that I think is quite funny. They wanted to have a society that was perfectly picturesque model of the pre-war America, and it was overseen by a tyrannical robot overlord. Before the bombs dropped, this robot was going to have been put in place, and its job would have been to ensure basically a housing authority. It would have made sure that a neighborhood, all houses were the right color, the lawns were trimmed right, the gardens were pretty, and even post-war continues to enforce this with lethal virility. I would have loved this as a questline, and I think it would have been a very funny one. In my brain, you could have even expanded it and made it similar to the tabletop RPG Paranoia. Keep this as a crater, but make it a settlement that survived with sort of a dome over it, and it's an isolated society that's cut off from the rest of the wasteland. Ultimately, instead of including the settlements, they just blew up their town. Is finding that to be funnier. And the last one is by far the most fleshed out bit of cut content, and the only one that still has a direct reference within the game, unless you count the people of Shady Sands mentioning that there's multiple raider groups. That group is the Slanter. You may remember that in the West Tech Research Facility, they mentioned that they had put FEV into raccoons, and they became much more intelligent and stronger and had escaped. The early plan had been that the Slanter would reproduce over the generations and form a small tribe. Let me try and find a more detailed breakdown of this so I can read it correctly. Slanter, let's see here. Yeah, they would have lived within the burrows. So, faction slanter, here we go. So, yeah, the slanter were the descendants of the mutated raccoons of the FEV experiments. And Jesus Christ, I hate how many ads are on the fandom website. They would have founded a settlement known as the Burrows, and they would have developed a sort of split culture. Over generations, they would gain a divided view on humans. Some of them would view humans as their divine creators, the ones who gave them sentience, while others would view humans as their horrid captors who had experimented on them and ended the world. These groups would split off into two separate factions, one living in the surface of the burrows and one living underground, as a reference to George Orwell's The Time Machine. When the player finds them, the slanters would have been having a lot of infighting, and the player would have to basically choose which group is the future of their idea, the militaristic underground or the passive ritualistic surface dwellers. Additionally, the slanter would have had quests tying them to the Vipers. The Vipers would stage raids on the slanters, kidnapping them, enslaving and eating them, and this is what would have led to much of the fear that slanters have of humans. And like, there's more to it, but that's just sort of a cursory glance at the very interesting faction that could have been. Now, the reason they were cut is very simple. The main head developer, Josh Sawyer, hated the idea of talking animals. He vetoed it outright, saying that they should not have talking animals in the Fallout world, and that it did not fit the tone they were leading into. I personally don't see a problem with it when you compare it to modern Fallout games, but Fallout 1 did have a much darker tone than the rest of the series, so I get his point of view. But I would love to see the slanters reappear in a modern Fallout game in some capacity, because they're a very interesting group in my opinion. Even to this day, Sawyer talks about how he dislikes it, and I believe it's Sawyer. I hope I'm not mixing up names of developers, but nowadays he's doing the Fallout Apocrypha, which is sort of a sequel to the Fallout Bible, where he talks about Fallout lore and developmental history. And he's still adamant that the series should not have sentient animals. Well, I mean, we're talking Fallout 1. Fallout, he actually has openly complained about a lot of the content in Fallout 2. He says that a lot of the talking animals found in Fallout 2 were added by a group of intern developers in the very last months of development, and he was kind of pissed off about it in the end. And, in particular, that talking mole rat didn't even make it into the final game. Everything you see of that talking mole rat is, content that was added back in by modders. You never see a talking mole rat in the base game of Fallout 2. But anyway, that's all of the content that I wanted to go over relating to Fallout 1. Now, you know, maybe we'll return to Fallout 1 in the future, like I said, but I don't think I really want to. But we will play other Fallout games in the future. Fallout 2, Fallout Tactics, 3, New Vegas, 4, even 76 are all on the table for future series. As well as other things. See, I'm a big fan of Shoddycast and Rad King, and their content delving deep into the lore of Fallout. And I may want to start taking a thwack at that, so keep an eye out. Every now and again, we might get small Fallout lore videos put out by me. No promises on how frequent they'll be or when they'll come out, but it's a thing I know I want to do. In the meantime, those of you who are watching on YouTube, this slot that the Fallout series has been in up to this point is now going to be taken over by the Black Mesa playthrough, with Black Mesa starting to come out 3 times a week, because that's what everyone over on the Discord voted on. And in the place of Black Mesa, a brand new game is going to be cropping up, Guardians of the Galaxy. Fuck the Disney Corporation. I absolutely hate Disney. I feel like I'm going to have to say that every time I start a video on that, because fuck Disney. But I'm looking forward to playing Guardians of the Galaxy for all of you. My friend Broditis bought it for me, and he's a really big fan of the game. And I know he's been looking forward to when I eventually play it. And one more closing thing before we head out is I want to once again bring up those votes that I was just mentioning. With Fallout having ended and, you know, Dishonored getting... I mean, not Dishonored, Half-Life getting promoted, we have a new vote here on picking what game I should play in the future. So, I recommend everybody go over, you know, join the Discord in the link below, and cast your votes on what you want to see me play. To reiterate how these votes work, when the time comes to pick a new game, I will choose the game with the highest vote count. And when a new vote begins, everything that is in last place, all the things that tie for last place, will be removed, while anything that is in at least second to the last place or above will carry on to the next voting cycle. So even if a game you want to see me play isn't necessarily doing good in the vote, you can cast a vote for it and it will carry on and hopefully be able to be picked again in the future. But anyway, that's all for now. I look forward to seeing all of you in the next series. Ta-ta!